Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to walk you through a major development unfolding in the East European theater, one with both logistical and strategic shockwaves, the collapse of what's been called the land bridge for Kaliningrad Oblast and parts of western Russia via Belarus. We're talking trains stuck, supply lines broken, political alarms sounding. Let's unpack how this happened, why it matters, and what it might mean going forward. What we're seeing now is that Belarus has apparently shut down several border crossings, road and rail, which effectively interrupts a key logistical corridor that Russia has relied on via Belarus into Kaliningrad and beyond. According to multiple reports, large numbers of trains have been immobilized, stuck at or near the border, unable to transit. This isn't simply a transportation hiccup. The land bridge concept here is vital. It's the route by which rail, freight, military equipment, and other transit pass between the Russian heartland via Belarus and Russia's isolated enclave of Kaliningrad, as well as other western regions. With that bridge severed, the consequences ripple far beyond the immediate snapshot of stranded trains. Let's go back and look at the context. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the regional logistics, rail and road corridors have become ever more contested. Belarus, Russia's close ally, has increasingly found itself in the limelight, not simply a passive transit route, but an active component of the Russian strategic axis. At the same time, Ukraine and its partners have targeted transport infrastructure. Rail lines, bridges, crossings are all high-altitude choke points. Now Belarus, apparently responding or being compelled, has closed these crossings. Reports note that some of this follows sabotage operations, partisan activity, or simply increased tensions at the border. The shutdown, therefore, isn't merely administrative, it reflects deeper military and political fault lines. So what exactly is happening on the ground? The reports say hundreds of freight trains are stuck, unable to cross the Belarus-Russia border or trapped in Belarus awaiting clearance. Cargo that might normally move unimpeded is instead locked in limbo. The consequences? Russia loses an efficient rail supply line. Belarus becomes the bottleneck for Russia's western enclave Kaliningrad, which is sandwiched between EU and NATO states. Alternative supply lines by sea or air are more tenuous, slower, and exposed. Suddenly, the logistical advantage Russia counted on is under threat. Now, why does this matter? Firstly, from a military, strategic standpoint, logistics are the lifeblood of any sustained operation. If your heavy equipment, fuel, ammunition cannot move swiftly, your operational tempo suffers. Russia relying on Belarus as it means any choke there translates into vulnerability. Secondly, from an economic/trade perspective, rail freight across Belarus has been a key artery not only for Russian military logistics, but also for cargo going between Asia and Europe via the so-called land bridge route through Eurasia. Disruptions send shockwaves through trade flows, raise costs, cause delays. Thirdly, from the geopolitical angle, the shutdown signals a moment of power shift, or at least of vulnerability. It shows that even allied nations Russia-Belarus can find logistics disrupted, whether by internal decision, security concerns, or external pressure. It raises questions of control, reliability, sovereignty. Let's explore potential causes and the why behind this. One cause offered is increased sabotage or partisan operations targeting Belarusian rail lines. Another is that Belarus is being more cautious about transit because of its own security calculations, perhaps concerned about being drawn deeper into war logistics or wanting to avoid being a choke point for NATO responses. Another possibility is external diplomatic or military pressure. Belarus might be under pressure from the West, Ukraine, or internal factions to limit transit. A fourth cause, Operational overload or infrastructure damage. Years of heavy usage, sanctions, maintenance issues could have made the lines brittle. Whatever the cause, the effect is the same: border crossings shut or severely restricted. Next, what are the implications? For Russia, this means they must find alternative routes. Sea and air it become more important, but more costly, slower, and exposed to interception. For Kaliningrad, this means their supply resilience is weaker. Militarily, this enclave can become isolated faster during a crisis. For Belarus, the move places it in a delicate spot, balancing loyalty to Russia with its own national interest and international pressure. Economically, for the Eurasian land bridge route China, Europe via Russia/Belarus, there will be knock-on effects. Shipments delayed, alternative sea routes used which take longer, costs rising. Politically, this gives Ukraine and NATO, aligned states, a leverage point. Interrupting supply lines is a non-kinetic but significant means of pressure. Looking at possible downstream effects, Russia may accelerate building alternative corridors, perhaps via the Baltic Sea or through other friendly states. We may see increased investments in Belarusian infrastructure repair or upgrades to keep it resilient. Belarus may demand higher transit fees or wider compensation for undertaking this function, affecting costs for Russia. Internationally, Chinese freight via Eurasia may be rerouted, altering global trade flows. Militarily, if the land bridge remains disrupted, Russia may face greater constraints in reinforcing its western theaters quickly. This may tilt calculations. Let's consider counter moves and responses. Russia could push diplomatic pressure on Belarus to reopen the crossings, perhaps offering economic incentives or military guarantees. Belarus could negotiate transit conditions, stricter security checks, delays, or conditional reopening. Russia might diversify, more usage of maritime supply lines or air transport for high-priority loads. Ukraine and its partners might view this as a success of the logistics warfare approach, disrupting enemy supplies without direct frontal attack. They might replicate similar efforts elsewhere. NATO may interpret this as a window of relative weakness in Russia's Western posture and adjust deployments accordingly. One important dimension: risk of escalation. Whenever a major supply link for Russia is disrupted, counters may escalate. Russia could respond by threatening Belarus or changing the rhythm of the war. Belarus might respond to incursions or sabotage with harsher measures or align more deeply with Russia, provoking Western responses. Therefore, we're not simply talking about trains stuck, we're talking about the logistics domain functioning as a battlefield. Another dimension, the narrative and domestic audience. Russia may frame this as sabotage or Western interference. Belarus may present it as precaution or internal security. Both sides will manage narratives so that domestic audiences do not panic over isolation. Meanwhile, the West and Ukraine may highlight this as a sign of Russian vulnerability and momentum shift. From a practical viewer point of view, what should you watch? First, the status of the border crossings. Will they reopen? Under what conditions? Second, timelines of stuck freight trains. How quickly are they cleared or rerouted? Third, alternative routes and their costs/time. If Russia shifts major volumes to sea, how much longer will it take? Fourth, statements from Belarusian leadership, whether they cite security concerns or fees. Fifth, Ukraine/NATO intelligence claims. Will they claim this as a win or continue to escalate logistics disruption elsewhere? Finally, what are some caveats? 1. The disruption may be temporary. Let's not overinterpret. Rail lines are resilient, agreements may be struck quickly, and the immediate crisis may pass. 2. The rate of impact depends on how many trains and what type of cargo are stuck. If mostly civilian freight, military may still be moving by alternate routes. 3. Russia has deep resources. Severe disruption may force a slowdown rather than a full halt. 4. Belarus motivation may not be purely independent. If Russia insists, it may return under new terms. So while this is serious, it may not necessarily be game over for the Russian logistics system. In closing, we're looking at a development that reminds us logistics matter more than many realize. Trains stuck. Border crossings shut. A land bridge once taken for granted now an Achilles heel. For anyone following the geopolitics of Eastern Europe, the war in Ukraine, Russia's supply chains, and the Eurasian trade routes, this is a moment to watch closely. I'll be keeping an eye on updates. How many trains remain stranded, how quickly transit resumes, whether new routes replace the old, and how Russia and Belarus adjust their posture. As always, I'll share any strong developments here. Thanks for watching, and if you found this breakdown helpful, please like, share, and subscribe so we can keep diving into these crucial logistics front developments together.